The Big 12's got options, folks. The Pac-12's got maybe some options, but they're not quite as favorable. We will talk Pac-12 desperation. We will talk Big 12 possibilities right here at the Voice of College Football for the next who knows how long we'll be on. Got plenty of great guests lined up, starting with Cody Stovall. Talking Oklahoma State football with all of you, locked on Oklahoma State, of course, is our guy Cody, all day Oklahoma State. Appreciate you being here, man.
Absolutely, Mark. I greatly appreciate the invite to jump back into this stuff. I know we tried to get hooked up after Big 12 Media Days. I apologize. I couldn't make that work, but here we are. We're alive and we're thriving.
Comments and questions there in the live chat. We will look to get as many of those answered as possible. It helps to supply the super chat as well. Please hit the like button before you do anything else. It's easy. Get it over with. You know you're going to love this, so just hit the like button before we move on talking about OK State, the Big 12, and everything else going on in college football. Share the videos out on social media. Let people know out there. Can you believe there are folks out there, Cody, that don't know that you are out here talking OK State in the Big 12 every day? There are folks out there, so it's up to all of you to spread the word. All right, share the videos out on social media.
I appreciate it. You know, and it's coming around. It's coming around. I feel pretty good about where the show's at, where we're headed. We're right around that 1,000 sub mark, and I've got a pretty cool custom giveaway to do there. So yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun. As we talked a little bit off air, thankfully this summer has been so eventful. It's been almost impossible for it to be boring. And I'm not just talking about Oklahoma State, obviously. What I have been trying to convey recently on some of my shows is there is a direct correlation between the Big 12 and Oklahoma State. I mean, you can make an argument to some degree about every single school in the Big 12 having the possibility of making a run at something, or at least making the race somewhat interesting, right? The last few years, it hasn't been the teams at the top that ended up in Arlington. It's been the teams that have been picked lower and in the middle. So somebody's going to jump up and get it. I don't see why there's any way that Oklahoma State is not in that picture. And it's not just because of the schedule. I think in the season for us could be very, very interesting. I also think that the last game of the season, BYU in Stillwater, is going to be worth something.
So you've put the orange and the black aside, correct, Cody, in making some of these projections for 2023? Because not everyone's high on Oklahoma State, and I'm being kind. I'm basically saying nobody's high on Oklahoma State.
Right. Correct. Well, so if you look back historically, whether it be because it was forced or he decided to do it himself, regardless of the scenario and the situation, Mike Gundy has a history of responding after bad seasons, right? Us being in bowl games for 17 years in a row, that's great. Winning is good. Having the opportunity to play for some Big 12 titles, that's good. We all know we need to capitalize and take that next step. But let's talk about this season. All right, specifically when it comes to the schedule, we play, when it comes to the preseason rankings, we're the only team that plays every single team ranked below us. The only other two teams that are ranked ahead of us that are on our schedule are Kansas State and OU. We have both of those at home. Yeah, you would typically chalk both of those up to a loss. That is fair. Until we beat OU, it is what it is. But I will also have the argument of the last time we thought it was the last Bedlam ever in Stillwater, we showed up, showed out, and got it done against the eventual Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. So it can be done. And the simplicity offensively is what really trips my trigger this year.
We've got Josh Neighbor standing by. We'll bring him in just a second and crank up, of course, the realignment talk and all the possibilities and all of that. But while we've got you solely here, Cody, again, we want to take a little bit of a deeper dive on Oklahoma State. I'm seeing 129 career starts coming back on this offensive line. Losing Spencer Sanders, replace him with Alan Bowman. I don't necessarily know if that's a good trade. However, Bowman played a couple decent half to three-quarter seasons at Texas Tech, and he's been kind of lost off the college football map for a couple of years now. He comes back to lead the offense, correct? Or do we still have a quarterback battle?
No. It's never really necessarily been a battle, but the backup quarterback, Garrett Rangel, did gain 17 pounds in the offseason. He did shave a couple tenths of a second off of his 40. He's clearly improved on his throwing motion. He's been working with that with the Timurte for a little while now. But Alan Bowman does make throws that blow your mind. He's the guy that'll go 49 for 50 into the net. Legitimately speaking, it has happened. But sometimes when they go scrimmage and it goes live, sometimes he misses some windows. He makes some crazy throws that are NFL caliber, and then he makes some head-scratching throws. So this is, again, why I say the simplicity of the offense is going to bail him out. This is not the Oklahoma State most people are used to. We're not going out there with the objective of putting up 65, 75 points. That is what most people still think about Oklahoma State University. And when some people talk about this season specifically, people are still talking about how Mike Gundy's offense can keep him in the game. That is true, but it's going to be different. You're going to see under center. In Stillwater, America, you're going to see quarterback under center. You're going to see traditional I formation, diamond formation, fullback, tight ends. We're going old school. The battle between Oklahoma State and Kansas State will be a war because of the stylistic matchup that it's going to be.
I'm going to get you revved up on defense using one name, and he no longer plays for you, but Mason Cobb is a guy that obviously was a big loss. He moves on to USC. So take me through the defense and why you're pumped up about the defense.
Mason Cobb is a massive loss, right? There's literally nobody out there that can say otherwise. But we did bring in Justin Wright, who, yes, he played at Tulsa, but good and daggone well. It's hard to replace numbers. He had 121 tackles at Tulsa his junior year, 102 tackles at Tulsa his senior year. You cannot replicate that type of production, right? That doesn't just come magically. And I've already said it. He is Justin Wright, the transfer middle linebacker from Tulsa. He is that Detroit Lions, Dan Campbell, chew your kneecaps off type of linebacker. Is he going to do what Mason Cobb did? No, absolutely not. Because athletically, they're two different people. But when it comes to, again, simplicity, filling the gaps, being sound in your responsibilities, and making chaos happen in the backfield, that's going to be Justin Wright's cup of taters. So is he going to be Mason Cobb? No. Is he going to do a job that we need to do? Yes. And we have recently moved to the 3-3-5 defense with new defense coordinator Brian Nardo. And, at first, most people think Brian Nardo is an off-the-wall hire. Where's this coming from? This is another, prototypical, where did Gundy get this guy type of hire. But then you dig back, he's got a rare past. He started coaching under Tom Solich at Ohio while he was in college, right? So he was a student holding a clipboard, learning how to handle meetings, learning how to do recruiting. And then his ascension through the game of football, it's been a meteoric rise, I guess you could say. His entire family coaches. This is the tree that he knew he was going to step into. And then when he was at smaller universities, you got to think about it. He knew he would go into 300 houses on recruiting, right? And know that he was going to get 280 no's. So if there's anybody out there that has learned to perfect the recruiting game at such a young age, it is him. And you're seeing that right now with just some of the recruits that we have coming in. People want to talk about the number all the time. That's fine. But when you go look at the film, we've got a defensive commit named Landon Cleveland who's out there recruiting for us, just like you would see out of a big-time quarterback. Brian Nardo is the injection of the defense we need. Colin Oliver, the All-American defensive end as a true freshman, has now been moved to linebacker. That's another fulfillment of the void there going to be left by Mason Cobb. And then obviously to top it off at the linebacker position, you have Xavier Benson coming back, who also played at Texas Tech and had a productive season last year statistically. But he will even tell you that defensively, they just got caught in the wrong schemes. They got caught in the wrong gaps, doing the wrong things, trying to do extra as opposed to just filling the simple responsibilities. And with the ability, the speed, the athleticism, and the depth that we have at the safety position, we're going to be able to do some things that are a little bit different. So 3-3-5 is a 4-2-5 base with the extra guy, right? The extra guy is typically the nickel corner style of guy. Well, it's not the case this year. Our extra guy is going to be somebody that's 6'4", 230 pounds, and runs a 4.4. It's a Von Miller type of guy instead of a nickel type of guy.
7-6 last year. If you've made your final prediction, I'll take it here. If not, we want to direct everybody over to Cody's channel. So have you made that final record prediction?
I'm pretty comfortable right now without the bowl game, I'd say 10-2 is very achievable. Yes,
Okay.
Sir.
All right.
Again, we
Achievable.
play 6 teams ranked below us. The two
So that's
hardest
the
teams that we
ceiling.
have are at home. We
Okay.
don't play Texas. We don't play Texas Tech.
All right. Josh Neighbor standing by. We're going to bring him on right now. You can catch him on the Neighborhood Watch. That's the new show, right, Josh?
It is, yes.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I have moved over from the Locked On Network. I am now still covering the Big 12, still 5+ days a week over the Neighborhood Watch, part of the 365 Sports Network. College Football Crystal Ball is the channel. Go there and subscribe. We are trying to get to 12K before the beginning of the season. We are about 800 or so away. So we always appreciate that. You can catch the show once again 5 days a week there and wherever you get your podcasts.
Folks, Josh is amazing. Cody's amazing. Follow them on Twitter. You're going to see their Twitter handles on the banner and the other platforms you can follow and join them. So just lock it in there. All right. We got Josh here to talk realignment as well as Cody. You can hang around as long as you'd like as we dice up everything that's going on in college football. But before we get to the thing that everybody's here about, folks, I probably have 10 hours of live streaming over the last 3 days just on realignment. So folks, go nuts, check it all out. We've had great guests. We've had great discussion concerning all the twists and turns recently with the Pac-12 and then the opportunities, obviously, for the Big 12. But Josh, before we get to that, I want to talk at least a little bit of football. We have so much off season that I think almost every major football team over the course of 8 or 9 months gets this narrative. And then everybody starts to think the same thing about that particular team. It just becomes groupthink. This is what Texas is going to be. This is what Oklahoma is going to be. This is what everybody's going to be. Is there anything going on in the Big 12 that we really should look out for in the next month that you think is maybe going under the radar about a particular team, particular player that might take us in a different trajectory than what everybody typically thinks about what this Big 12 season is going to look like?
Yeah, the when I was at Big 12 Media Days, it was funny. It was actually the school we just didn't hear about, and there was not a lot of TCU talk, which was strange, obviously, because they had just played the national championship. I think because with how cyclical the league has been, right, and Oklahoma State was a part of that. I mean, you had Iowa State, Oklahoma played in 20 in the championship game. You then had Baylor and Oklahoma State play the championship game in the Big 12 in 2021, and then you had K-State and obviously TCU. And I think there is this idea that the Big 12, there's with no dominant powers, like there is a kind of this filtering, right? There is this systematic kind of running through. Then the teams that were there, obviously we saw at Baylor and Oklahoma State, take a step back. I think Kansas State and TCU are kind of out to buck the trend. Oklahoma did have a 10-win season, but they didn't make the Big 12 title game, right? So we haven't had any repeat offenders in the last few years. So I think TCU, with a new offensive coordinator in Kendall Briles, who I think is a pretty good fit for them there. Chandler Morris, I'm very interested to see how he is at the quarterback spot. And also they get the Nolan kid from TCU. So not they have a pretty decent depth there. And that's what you want to be able to do is build some depth. They've got a lot to replace, but the good news for them is a lot of their secondary is back, which I think is good. And the defense, which was not excellent last year, but I mean, really, when it came to adjustments, they were probably you could even argue one of the best groups in the entire country. But I think the best group in the entire Big 12 when it came to one side of the ball, getting better through the course of a game. I think TCU's defense was that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see an offensive-minded head coach with a really good offensive coordinator, a team to see how much they can lean on a defense that I think should be better than last year. Now, what that means, I don't necessarily know because they were not excellent at getting pressure a lot of the time, but man, they forced a lot of turnovers. They forced a lot of turnovers and important turnovers that too. They were just a timely group as a whole, but like a really timely defense. And even though they started slow in a lot of games, they're able to kind of work their way through it. So I'm excited to see what that group looks like because it feels like everybody's like, all right, they made it there. But naturally, they'll cool off because that's what Big 12 teams do. And last year was lightning in a bottle. I think in a pretty wide open league, they might be able to capitalize a bit more off of the momentum from last year.
When you set that up for us, Josh, the name that actually came to mind was Steve Spurrier, who did what he did at Florida. We all know the fun and gun. He went to South Carolina. It took him a couple years. Then he figured out actually, I'm going to win with running the football and defense. And they were a much better defensive team and run-oriented team than ever, throwing it around during his 11-win 3 consecutive years there at South Carolina. And he didn't like it. I got to think innately didn't necessarily like it, but it's what worked. All right.
Mike Gundy did that too. Cody and I mentioned this before, though, but that's what Mike Gundy did in 21. Cody and I talked about it like ad nauseum, but just the fact that team won with running the football and defense was objectively hilarious.
All right, folks, again, we got Josh Neighbors here. We got Cody Stovall. You got to catch them on their particular platforms, and you're going to see them throughout the show. They're on the banners there, so just lock it in. And again, we've been carving this up for days and days and days. It is the talk of college football. So, Josh, I'll just serve it up this way to get us started. What was your initial reaction when we got the news yesterday that George Kliavkoff had presented the Apple deal to the presidents of the Pac-12, and they went?
Yeah, well, I think there's some conversation about what they had. Now, look, like, we have to understand this. It's a really intriguing deal. Like, and it might actually be a deal of what the future looks like. The problem for them is this was not the deal they wanted to present, right? When Colorado leaves, and folks have been putting on some pressure to see some tangible numbers, you kind of have to show your hand, right? You kind of have to. I saw the quote in the Ross Dellinger article. Somebody said either he's the best poker player of all time or he's bluffing, right? Well, the chips are down at this point. Cards are down at this point. And so while I find the deal an incredibly interesting case study, the issue for them is, and for these schools is, if the SEC gets a deal where it's like, look, you have a certain we'll promise you $50 million per school per year. And then, hey, you can up that with subscriptions and whatnot. Well, for the SEC, you might like your chances with all the subscriptions. You might like the chance. And also you feel pretty good about $50 million a year per school. The problem is for them, a couple things. Number one, there's a better option, right? There is a bar, if you will. And that bar has been offered to a few schools, right? So Utah, Arizona State have the option, from what it sounds like from reporting, to go to the Big 12. And we just saw that Colorado got a full share of what Big 12 schools are getting, 31.7 promised from the TV companies. So you'd assume that that's what the other schools would get as well. So I think that the figure being thrown out is 20 million, right? I saw Dennis Dodd put out there, but if the base is 20 million with room to grow, my issue is that $10 million, we're at that point, 7, 8, 9 figures, it's a large gap, right? $10 million, I guess is what, 8 figures. So it's a pretty large gap. And it's really difficult to set a budget because these schools, I mean, this is like the number one job of administrators is looking at budgets and whatnot. It's hard to set a budget if you don't know what the exact numbers are going to be, right? And this, I'll give you all tangible examples. That goes down to things like student athlete experiences, right? Recruiting weekends, things like, how much support staff you're able to hire and whatnot, right? We always talk about this. This is something that gets talked about a lot, but the army of polos, they call it on the sideline for Georgia, for LSU, for Alabama, right? Grad assistants who could, might be tracking the smallest things, like how many steps a running back took, getting on and off the field, whatever. That's not actually the track, but you all get the gist. Hiring people like that, support staff, like that stuff is dictated by these numbers. Not just that, but other things as well. So when you're talking about a number as low as 20 million guaranteed and the ability to make more, you just don't want to be in the spot though, where it's going to be dependent on subscription numbers, because I think the television companies have learned this, and this is not just in the sports space. We've seen this recently with the boom of how many shows are being greenlit. And now a lot of companies are kind of drawing back on that now, so the subscription number game that's used to be what these companies were chasing. And now they're trying to, but it's not just easy. You can't just toss Obi-Wan on Disney Plus and get the subscription numbers you want to, right? You can't just toss the Marvel content on there and get the numbers you want to. And right here, you can't just toss Pac-12 numbers on there and get the numbers you want to. So the thing is, for Apple, it's pretty low risk, right? Well, we'll pay you out this much because we think it'll be worth this much in subscriptions. But hey, if you hit a certain target, we'll pay up because we're hitting targets that we didn't think we'd hit. So it's a risk that these schools would having to take it. I understand if they had no other option, but if you have a safer option, I just don't understand why you wouldn't go at that direction when we're talking about potentially tens of millions of dollars.
Cody.
Yes, sir. Well, you know what? I really like Josh's take on TCU. You are hearing that they're going to fall backwards, and this I don't see it. I really don't see it. I understand that Sonny Dykes did it with a lot of Gary Patterson's guys, but he did very well in the transfer market. So I could totally see TCU, making a play there at the end of the season. The team that I scares me the most is Texas Tech. Right? For somebody that can come from the bottom to the top really quick. There's no substitute for momentum. They have a lot of that in Lubbock right now. They're investing money into the facilities. They're investing money into the program. Tyler Shock is a very good quarterback. He proved it at times at Oregon. Kind of a similar story to Alan Bowman right now being in Oklahoma State. But, I'm a firm believer in their backup, Baron Morton as well. So Tech is scary to me. I'm glad we don't play them this year. I'm glad we avoid Texas, right? It hurts my heart to even pretend to say Texas is probably going to be pretty good. So I don't mind avoiding them this year finally, even though we've done pretty good against them the last decade. As far as the realignment thing goes, as I'd mentioned earlier, I'm going to be rocking the proud Big 12 Anon flag here before too long, simply because, Josh knows I was on Josh's program, I don't know, probably 7-8 months ago. And I mentioned I firmly believe that the four corner schools would end up in the Big 12 before a year or two. And I've been on your program previously saying the same thing. So I thought this was an inevitability. I never really saw the financial side of things being very advantageous for the Pac-12. The more they push the goalpost back, I felt like the worse it was, right? Because if you know you have something good, you don't mind hooting and hollering about it from the top of the mountains. If you know it's not great and it's not presentable, you're going to keep pushing it back, trying to find a way to make it a little bit better. Josh did mention that streaming may be the way of the future, and he very well may be right. But the Big 12 offers security, right? There's nothing in the Pac-12 that equals we're secure. We know where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the differentiation to me. It's less about the money. I mean, everything revolves around money. We get that. But it's less about the financials and more about the security and putting yourself in a position to be part of the next experience of realignment.
As I survey what the Pac-12 did over the last year to 2 years, even going back to the Oklahoma to Texas move to the Big 12, there are so many things that they could have done differently to have slightly corrected the situation. So there's about 48 things they did wrong. And if they would have they could have hit about 40 of those wrong and about 8 right, and this would have been a much better situation for them. And I hesitate not being the guy on the front lines, in the negotiating room, at the board table. So I say all this partially in hindsight, although I made some of these calls in the moment. Number one, we are certainly finding out, and there's a lot of reports that there was maybe a little too much hand holding of USC, trying to placate to USC, ignoring that, hey, college football is moving fast and furious right now. The Big 12 is vulnerable. You may want to pounce now. No, they didn't do that. They let it go. The Big 12 secured their league by gaining the 4 schools that they did. Great job by Brett Yormark, of course, going after and securing the best 4 properties that he possibly could at that point. Then we also have a situation most recently. Well, from a negotiating standpoint, I said from the very beginning, if you're the weakest league, whether you think that's on the field currently or not, you're the weakest league when you add it all up in terms of football brands. And you have a number of opportunities to stake some claims in terms of the inventory and the time slots available, but you're going to wait. The brands that are in a position of power, you may want to wait as a strategy, but you take up the territory and take up the time slots when you've got the opportunity. You don't wait. So everybody else floods in and takes up all the inventory, and then they're left with what they're left with now. And then there's this curious relationship and back and forth they had with San Diego State. And once that sequence of letters was released, I'm not going to go through all of that. I did at the time on a number of videos, but just to not be able to, and it appears as though the Pac-12 was the one that made that decision. We no longer want San Diego State because they obviously made their proclamation to the Midwest or the Mountain West Conference that we're gone. We're say goodbye. We've had a great relationship, but we're gone. Then all of a sudden they started to backpedal because they didn't have a landing spot. What was the Pac-12 thinking when they've got this gaping hole in Southern California? They had San Diego State wanting into the league, and they dropped the ball there. We could go on, but Josh, I'll let you take it from here in regards to the many missteps of the Pac-12 or wherever else you want to take this.
Yeah, so this is the angle I want to take on this, and I think this is what people this is what people have to understand here, is that the biggest mistake that the Pac-12 made was thinking that the Big Ten deal applied to them. That I'll give it to like this. So like that is the same thing as thinking that, and this is just imagine the MLS without Messi, right? That is like thinking that whatever the Premier League contract is signed for television wise somehow applies to Major League Soccer. It doesn't, right? They're the same sport, sure, but it's apples and they're two different things. They're completely, it's apples and steak. If you want to, use just a different, they're completely different things, right? The Big Ten is college football. So is a Pac-12. The Big Ten has Ohio State. The Big Ten has Michigan. The Big Ten has Michigan State and Penn State and Wisconsin, all of these brands. That is why they got a awesome deal from 3 separate places. And I think the Pac-12 read that as, oh, we're not going to get that much money, but these companies are paying a premium for live sports, and it's particularly for college sports, and particularly college football is the second most popular sport TV ratings wise in the entire country. The thing that Brett Yormark did was he realized the Big 12 is not. He realized the Big 12 is not. And here's the thing: he's not a football guy, which actually makes him really very fit to be the commissioner of the league right now, because he kind of gives him the outside perspective. But he's like, we are a television product. That's what we are. That's what we have to sell to exist. That's what we are. And so what the Big 12 can service the TV companies as is a good way to have compelling games on throughout the year in a bunch of different time slots. The Big 12 now has the advantage of having games kick off at, and I'll use Eastern time because that's kind of what television companies use, at 11 a.m. Eastern, and they can have games kick off at 10 p.m. Eastern, right? They can fill games anywhere in between. You get any kind of game in all of those spaces. So that's why it makes sense for them that they kind of knew what they were. And when I think about this conversation right now about the Big 12 adding more schools, I saw Stuart Mandel say, oh, Colorado has been crap in football. He's not wrong. Arizona's been crap in football. He's not wrong. That's not the point, though. The point is the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are two of the leagues that are not the SEC. They're not the Big 10, but they still represent the Power 5. They still represent leagues that are going to put teams in a college football playoff. And they have somewhat recognizable brands that can fill out a TV schedule. So adding Arizona and Colorado is not about Arizona football. It's not about Colorado football. It's the television companies said, yeah, we'll pay you the same amount for those schools. And you're weakening the Pac-12, which is a competitor. That's who you're competing against. This is not about like, can Dion run the Big 12? That's, as much as we'd all like it to be, and we love football, like this is about like the television numbers. That's what this is about. The survival of these leagues is about how much these companies will pay for them. And the Big 12 understands what they are and understands what their strategic goals need to be. More like, as like Big 12 Mexico doing stuff differently, right? Who knows if that will work? It might not. It probably won't work. Playing a football game in Mexico probably ain't gonna work. Basketball, maybe it could be something different, but like it might not work, but it's an idea. It's something different. And they're trying to differentiate themselves. And they understand what they are. They might try some different stuff, but Brett Yormark's understanding of what this is makes that's why he's done so well. And I think the Pac-12 misread the room from that moment on. And as soon as the Big 12 jumped them in the line and they thought they could get a better deal than the one that was offered to them, they kind of sunk their ship. Now, I don't think anybody knew how this was going to shake out, how it was going to turn out, but they were not in a position of power. And the television companies have basically milked that as far as they could at this point now. And now they're coming in saying, all right, we'll give you $20 million and we'll see how well you do after that. So I think the understanding of what you are and what you aren't, the self-awareness, if you will, is what has put the Big 12 in the spot.
Anything on that, Cody?
Well, Josh, I like it when you preach, man. I like it when you get on and you get rocking and rolling. Mark, I don't know if you knew this, but Josh, I got to give kudos. He is the dude, the man with that helped me get into this game, get into this industry. So I'll always be offered a bunch of gratitude towards him. The only things I'd really add are Brett Yormark is phenomenal. Brett Yormark is exactly what this conference needed. He's taking things in a direction that a lot of us didn't even really think was possible. But we do have to give one batch of roses to Bob Bowlesby. If he did one thing right, he solidified the 4 schools, which allowed Brett Yormark to come into a conference that at least had some concrete that was drying, right? Bob Bowlesby catches a lot of shade, as he should, but that's the one good thing he did to help Brett Yormark. Brett Yormark is going to do a lot of things, right? The chess to checkers mentality, that's exactly what's been happening between him and George Kliavkoff. It's beautiful to see. It's nice to finally be in a position of stability and security. I don't think it's a point and laugh type of situation. I really don't. I think it's terrible for college football to even think about places like Washington State and Oregon State and potentially Stanford, right? Some of these places that may not have a lot of places to go. I'm not happy about it, but it is about security and the future. And Brett Yormark's got us positioned in the right spot.
Cody, while we've got you revved up here, we're going to switch gears and go back to the field because we've got Matthew Miller chiming in. Appreciate it, Matthew. Thank you for the contribution. I may have missed this, but my question for Cody, I have Alan Bowman ranked as the 11th best quarterback in the Big 12 and 13th best quarterback room. Why do you realistically expect big things, I guess?
Well, I mean, if he can stay healthy, right, that's the ticket. He's the only quarterback in the Big 12 that's thrown for over 600 yards. That's something. We all saw what he could do at Texas Tech. And then he's had two punctured lungs, broken collarbone, broken ankle. He has been a walking piece of glass. It just is what it is. If we can protect him and he's way different than Spencer Sanders. He's not going to break out of the pocket unless it's absolute necessity. He's going to try to pick you apart from within the pocket. And since we finally have we haven't had a legitimate two deep on the offensive line in at least 7-8 years. If that holds up and we have the power at the running game that I think we're going to have, we got the transfer from Michigan State, Elijah Collins, who rushed for like 988 yards a couple of years ago before, Walker went off and did his thing. He is a good guy to have, and he might not even be the starting running back. Ollie Gordon was somebody that Texas went after heavy. We got to see what he could do a little bit last year. He should have been the starter last year, in a lot of people's opinion. The running game and the offensive line are going to allow Alan Bowman to not have to do as much. Spencer Sanders had to do way too much. So if Spencer Sanders was off, we were off. It just was what it was. That is not going to be asked of Alan Bowman. He's going to be more than a game manager, but he's not going to be a guy that's asked to chunk it down the field all the daggone time. Nor is he going to be a guy that's going to be asked to rush the football. Our O-line and our running game with the fullback and tight end that we brought in, these things are why I think Alan Bowman could have a very good year.
It's been my approach to all this realignment talk over the last 2 years, ever since Oklahoma and Texas jumped to the SEC, to say, I'm not making predictions. What I am doing is I'm going to serve up my analysis based on facts, based on metrics, but also my perspective on the sport of how good the football brands are, how good are the TV markets, what are the institutions, what are the cultures that fit or don't fit, and what makes sense. And I presented a video shoot over a year ago, right about the time USC and UCLA jumped, with a Stanford, Cal, Washington, Oregon addition to the Big 10 that was a Big 20 of sorts. Well, Josh is sharing with us Yahoo Sports reporting that Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford in talks with the Big 10 right now, Josh.
Yeah, so this came over actually about 20 minutes ago from Dan Wetzel over at Yahoo. And I thought this was a matter of time. It's about it like this too, right? I think the payouts for Big 10 schools are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million. Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and Cal would not make anywhere near that, right? You're getting them at a bargain. And now, eventually, when you sign your next TV deal, I think it's going to be in 2030, I think for them is when it's up, or 2031 is when it's up.
7-year deal. Yep.
Yeah, so they'll negotiate basically in 2030 or somewhere in that range. They'll probably become most likely full members then, or somewhere around full members then. Yeah, so this was kind of inevitable, right? I mean, it felt like at some point you kind of have to make this call because you can open up more of a West Coast office. My question is this, and this is like, I was born on the West Coast. I really enjoyed watching Deshaun Jackson growing up. I enjoyed Pac-12 football and Versus. Does Stanford and Cal have an appetite to like be in major college football? Like, I think we seriously have to question that. In basketball too. I mean, like I really think it needs to be questioned, those schools' commitment to wanting to be good in those sports. Because look, there are some folks that I think this kind of gets to the political realm with some of this stuff, but man, like their priorities are a bit different, right, out there at those schools, those institutions. And I think it's honestly to their detriment, even though I might, agree with some of the stuff they think. Like, I think the kind of not looking at the sports enough has really hurt them in some ways. And they're lucky that they have such great name brand recognition. But I mean, good Lord, I couldn't imagine those two schools getting the life raft, because what have they shown recently where they really freaking care about being good at football? I know Stanford might be showing some life here, and Cal apparently has put some money to NIL. I think it's what Bud Elliott said recently. But there's not a lot of tangible evidence that the fan bases really care and that those schools add anything except for, Cal and Stanford, great rivalry, good name, and good academics, which to me doesn't do a whole lot for me in terms of football.
Yeah, I think the 2020 COVID year revealed a lot about what these conferences believe about their football and the importance of the football. Of course, the SEC, I thought there was a few weeks there where there might just be an SEC season, and SEC may be college football for 2020. Then, of course,
Right.
the Big 12 was right there. The ACC was right there. The Big 10 very much was split. You see the,
it's funny because Kevin Warren, right, took a lot of heat for his decision, because they at first weren't going to play, and then they were. But also Kevin Warren ends up inking one of the greatest television contracts in the history of college sports. So I mean, the duality of that. Mark, I want to add one thing to this though.
Sure.
Heath Amel tweeted out. He said, the Big Ten doesn't want to be predatory. It wants the Pac-12 to fall by its own. Please spare me this. And this is the same thing we saw with Arizona, and like they don't want to go by themselves, or some schools like that, because they don't want to be the one that end this. College athletics makes billions of dollars off the backs of unpaid labor. That is how they've been doing it for a while too. So spare me with we don't want to be predatory. This has been a predatory business like the entire time. So I like how not like, what, we don't want to be the ones to break it up. No, you just want them to be in as weak of a position as possible, right? Because if more schools leave, that lessens the leverage that those schools have, and they will take any amount of money that you give them to join the conference that they will. So, the idea that they're like, we don't want to be predatory, please spare me. I'm not saying it's Pete's fault. I'm saying this is what the Big Ten is putting out there, but spare me with we don't want to be predatory thing. It's just ridiculous.
Well, back to the Pac-12 caring or not caring about football. And I think I was at the point just to basically say, we saw three conferences, especially the SEC, of course, putting in the safeguards and the guidelines and everything to keep people safe, to keep their players safe. All of that, I think, was well orchestrated for the most part, considering the circumstances and dealing with something that had never been dealt with before. But there was a commitment to playing football. Basically, we're committed to football. And unless this becomes overriding to a point where the safety concerns, the health concerns override it. But our focus, our purpose, our approach is to play football. And the Pac-12 was the exact opposite. We have to be proven that we can play football, that it's going to be safe to play football, but we're going to shut down. The Big Ten was this complete split between the administrators and the academician portion of it, saying we're not playing football, and the coaches, the players, the fans, the alumni, the grassroots people saying we're football people, we want to play football. And you saw the big split in the Big Ten and the way that played out. Now, getting to Stanford and Cal, I don't know what happened to Stanford here in the last 5 or 6 years, other than the football product has obviously hit the skids. I don't know what has happened internally, but I know Stanford can win. They can compete in football. Now, how many people are going to show up at the games? I guess if they, at the time, if this were 2012, the big Oregon game, the big USC game, the place is 75% full for a 50,000 seat stadium. Cal hasn't been good since Aaron Rodgers left, basically. But I don't know if they're banking on when Ohio State hits campus and Wisconsin and Penn State and bring all those people cross country, because I saw a 1-11 Cal team playing a home game against Ohio State 10 years ago, and the place was packed because, of course, it was full with people traveling from Ohio, and also just transplants in California that follow Big Ten football. So maybe they're banking on that. And of course, there is an academic component that the Big Ten would love to have those academic institutions. So maybe that overrides the apathy in football, and maybe it sparks a little pride to jumpstart them and say, hey, if we don't want to get embarrassed every week in the Big Ten, we're going to have to start to devote some time and effort to this.
Yeah, also you have to play Indiana and stuff like that too. So I mean, like
You do.
eventually, like I mean, God love Rutgers. They're not terrible. This is also the funny part too. Is like Purdue and Rutgers and Indiana are all going to get the same amount of money that Ohio State gets, which is nuts and bonkers to me. But yeah, I think for them it's going to kind of bump up their appetite level to kind of get good, right? You know what I mean? Like I think it would motivate them some.
Josh, you know what, and Cody as well, you know what metric I would love to see? There's tons of metrics I would love to see out there that would just be so exhaustive for anyone to take on. But like, I would like to see recruiting rankings re-ranked about 5 years later. I'd love to see everybody, and again, I know that particular sites do it for their team, but you've got to do the entire landscape to do it accurately. What I would like to see in this game of realignment is, so Josh letting us know that the average, all the Big Ten teams that get the full share will get, let's say, roughly 80 million. So let's say the valuation of the league per team is 80 million. What is Ohio State versus what is? It's gotta be. All you have to do is look at the TV ratings. If it's well over twice that. It's probably 3 times that. It's like 250 for Ohio State and 220 for Michigan and 12 for Rutgers. And, I would love to see somebody try to make a reasonable estimation on valuation per school, per conference versus the TV contract.
Right. Well, it's the same thing for like the SEC, right? Like how much are you paying for Alabama? And somebody put it pretty well. It's not even like just Alabama. Some of that is too, but like when you're bringing Oklahoma and Texas over, you're paying really for some games, but Red River, right? Red River is one of the most watched, biggest games of the year. Lock it in every single season, right? You are getting that game guaranteed. I can guarantee you ESPN and Fox, or ESPN is like, yes, that game will go, and because that game has been on Fox some, it's been on ESPN some. That ESPN now gets that game. That's almost worth the price of admission for them having that one game every single year, right? They're going to have, I think, Bama, Texas this year is going to be on. I want to say it's on ESPN this year.
It was on Fox last year.
Right? Yeah. But just getting that, like that's what you're really paying for, the big ones. You're paying for the big games. Yeah, Oklahoma versus Missouri will be nice and fine, and Oklahoma against Vanderbilt, you'll draw a rating, and even OU Florida, right, or Texas Florida, right? That's really interesting. You'll probably do a good number on that. But you want LSU Texas, you want LSU OU, you want OU Texas, you want OU Alabama. That's what you're paying. You're Michigan Ohio State, right? That's really what you're paying for with these kinds of things.
All right, comments and questions there in the chat. We will look them over as we continue our discussion. We appreciate Josh being here from Neighborhood Watch, and that's right here on YouTube, and that's also audio as well.
Yes, wherever you get your podcast, just look up the Neighborhood Watch. It sounds like a crime podcast. It is not. We are Big 12 content 5+ days a week. If you guys look up just Neighborhood Watch, Josh Neighbors, or Neighborhood Watch, you should be able to find it. It's a nice little street sign icon. A black, an orange, and white street sign with the Neighborhood Watch in it. So that is the podcast, and you guys can find it in all of those places. And shout out 365 Sports for letting me come on board.
Absolutely.
Hey, shout out for that color combo, buddy. Shout out to that color combo.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was trying to do something that was, kind of big, because the Big 12 does like I have the flag over here, but black, white. And so I decided to chuck a little bit of orange in there as well too. It just looked good. Dude,
hey man, this was meant to be. I'm wearing most of my closet orange. This is my Arizona colors. All right, I'm ready for the day. I got my red and my blue on. I would stand up and model my blue shorts, but I just got a new camera. I don't want to break it. Don't want to break the internet either. So, yeah, guys, it's been a pleasure. Like anytime I can get reconnected with Josh, I think it's phenomenal. His takes are always really daggone good. I appreciate and respect the time he puts in. I appreciate and respect what you do, Mark. Your ascension over the years has been nothing short of awesome to see. So happy to be a part of it. As it goes to the Pac-12 decision making, my dad always taught me to view life in a, I don't know, kind of a nonsensical type of way. If you play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. It's hard for me. Like, again, I hate the fact that all of this stuff is hurting the game of college football. But at the same time, it's hard to have a crap ton of sympathy when some of these places kind of did it to themselves, exclusively the Pac-12.
Well said, Cody. And we'll take you in this direction. As a Big 12 guy, where do you want the Big 12 to go in a reasonable way?
Well, I firmly believe that this is the race to the Mega 3. I really do believe that. I think at some point in time, it's going to come down to the top 60, 65-ish teams in the country. Obviously, the Big Ten is going to be secure. The SEC is going to be secure. So the race is who's going to be conference number 3, because the ACC is obviously not in a very stable position either. So the ACC and the Pac-12 could be in a drastically different place a year or two from now, right? So the Big 12's position itself, if it does end up being a Mega 3 type of situation, we're positioned very, very well. But I do think that it's going to take more. It might take 4 corner schools. I think you should still potentially look at adding a UConn, because if it does get to that level in the next 5, 6, 7 years, that means you're going to have 3 conferences with what, 16, 18, going to continue to grow. And I don't think Brett Yormark should be afraid of grabbing a G5 versus a P5. We're going to grab more Power 5 teams, right? I think that's also an inevitability. But when it comes to safety and security, we could go grab a San Diego State, and I don't think that it would hurt us financially in any capacity whatsoever. So I think we're in a good spot.
Would that not be a slap in the face to the Pac-12? My goodness, if the Big 12 scarfs up San Diego State, we didn't really need them, but you didn't want them. Hey, well, they can come here and go 7-5 every year because shoot, that school I think actually has a 500 record against the Pac-12 like in the last decade. So why you would not want to bring them on? Anyway, Josh, next steps for the Big 12. What do you think is going to happen? Oh, I think you're on mute.
You're mute, buddy.
There we go. I think you have to stay on the Pac-12 schools, obviously, right? You want to maintain pressure on that because Fox and ESPN have guaranteed a certain amount, right? So you are happy with Fox and ESPN coming through in that way, and so you want to stay on those schools. And once again, it's not about like how good. I think obviously out of all these football-wise, adding Utah is the best one. Short-term upside, probably Utah and Colorado, right? Long term, I think you're hoping for ASU maybe to kind of make that leap. They should be better than they are, so you're hoping that can happen too. And I think obviously Arizona for basketball is really good. But once again, the number one thing is you add just more schools that people are familiar with. You add them at a price that's good, and also you weaken the Pac-12. And so there is a different television. There's one less big TV competitor because I think the Pac-12 kind of remains. The best brand west of the Rockies is conference wise is the Pac-12. So even if like the Mountain West was like, hey, let's just join with whatever is left of the Pac-12. Like, I think it's smart to call yourselves a Pac-12. Now there might be so much bad baggage that you want to change the name, but still like it is the Pac-12. It is the West. It is the conference west of the Rockies. I would want to keep that name. That's just me though. So I think weakening what is the Pac-12 right now is your best bet at a more secure future because you've added some more of those schools. They're recognizable brands and not top tier brands, but you basically create like a voting block. And like Cody said, it might be a rush for the big 3. I think it's kind of the big 2 and what else is going to happen the rest of the way is really interesting. But if you have 16 schools and you continue to play really well and, teams like TCU pull upsets every once in a while in the CFP, like it's just hard to imagine a world where you get left out, right? When you have whatever it ends up being, 16-team playoff or whatever it's going to end up being, because it's going to make a lot of money. Maybe there are less Big 12 teams in it, but still I think Big 12 teams will be involved. And I think that they've got a really good shot because of the way Brett Yormark has handled this. I think they're just going to be able to create a voting block. Money-wise, the gap's there, and I'm not sure how they beat SEC teams. But besides that, you're going to be a part of the action. The one thing is how do you clear the hurdle, which I don't think they can do.
Appreciate you being here, folks. Please hit the like button. It's easy to do. And again, get on Josh's platform as well, Neighborhood Watch right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform, Cody Stovall. Best way to find you, Cody?
Yeah, man, I'm pretty simplistic in my approach. I'm not the most technologically advanced individual in the world. I do have a Twitter at All Day O State, and I have a Facebook O State All Day. I have an Instagram O State All Day. See, look at me, I'm growing, and yeah, you can find my show Locked On Oklahoma State, YouTube, every single podcasting platform available, all that fun jazz. And then yeah, I like to have some fun on Twitter every now and again.
Josh, it seems as though the SEC path to expansion is straight to the southeast. The logical schools are Clemson, Florida State, and then to a lesser degree, Miami, North Carolina, and however you want to end the list from there, Georgia Tech possibly. And where the Big Ten has gotten into that conversation while still maintaining this path to the west to hook up some schools with USC and UCLA. I got to think some of the recent rumors about Florida State and Clemson, if the Big Ten would cut off the SEC there, this really could swing in the Big Ten's direction as opposed to the Big Ten taking from the West and the SEC taking from the remainder of the ACC elite.
Yeah. So the Florida State thing, like, I struggle with this because from what I was told about the ACC grant of rights from people I worked with when I was at SiriusXM and talked to a lot of folks in the ACC channel. And I've got friends in ACC country. I grew up there and I know a lot of people, mostly fans, like not people in the offices and whatnot, but everybody acknowledges this grant of rights appears to be very hard to break. And I know Florida State's talking about it, but there's a reason they kicked around uneven revenue sharing in the conference that's been talked about. I forgot if they approved it or not, but like they can't get out. I mean, it's my understanding, like they can't just get out of this thing. Like they cannot just leave. They might be able to fight it legally, but they just can't leave the conference if they'd like to. They signed a television contract through 2036. It's nice that they're going to be together, but like they've locked themselves into what is a really bad situation that other conferences have a chance to pass them, mainly the Big 12, on money wise. So I'm not abreast fully of what's happening. I know I've mentioned 8 or whatnot, but when I spoke to folks like Tom Luganbill, he told me, he said, hey, every person I know who's got like a law degree and whatnot says this thing is it's pretty ironclad. And even if they could pay a fee when they leave, it's a massive fee. Also, I don't think they can just pay a fee and get the rights to the games back. I believe the way I read it is that they would owe money, but also the television contract companies would still have like the rights to the games. They can't just go and give the rights away. They're part, there's the conference exit fee, and then there's the actual what you signed up for with the television companies. So, I think all of that is tied together. I have to look at it more once again, but it's been explained to me it's really hard to break. And they might find the money to do it, but it's going to take a substantial chunk of change.
Josh, isn't the number 591?
I've seen numbers that have been the 9 figures, and that number is because of how long the contract is for.
So say
you owe ESPN. And here's the thing, but the thing about this too, ESPN would not make that easy for them, right? The ACC is basically all their television rights are basically owned by ESPN. And ESPN sublets game. ESPN sublets those games to CW. Why in the hell would ESPN make it easy at all for Florida State to get out of that thing? You fight them tooth and nail because guess where they're headed? The Big Ten. The Big Ten, none of their TV partners are ESPN. So I could not see this thing being a really comfortable situation. I think it's going to be very difficult to do. And I think in a legal fight, I'm going to trust Mickey Mouse's lawyers over the ones in Tallahassee, as big of a brand as they are.
Well, Mickey Mouse ain't making very much money right now, brother, man.
I think the legal team. I'll still take the legal team over the Disney legal team.
I really firmly believe that if little old Oklahoma State University and little old Stillwater, America, can have a dude step up and give us a $365 million check when he's alive, and then send us another $150 million check when he's up in heaven at OSU, guaranteed Florida State is going to be able to come up with $600 million. Like it is, they have 30,000 times more donors than Oklahoma State will ever have. So regardless of Mickey Mouse lawyers or Mickey Mouse money, at the end of the day, we've talked about it ad nauseum, right? It's about money. If Florida State can come up with $600 million, yeah, ESPN's not going to make it super easy because they have a sweetheart deal right now with the SEC through 2035 or whatever it is. But again, if somebody's willing to cut a check, I have a hard time believing Florida State University can't can't cut that check. I firmly believe that they can.
I think the path might be something in the middle where it's get our legal team on it, negotiate less money, be a pain in the ass, and want to be thrown out of the league, and maybe we negotiate at 300 or 400 million. And there are clauses in that contract. So like Josh, anybody that's got a legal background that I've talked to says this grant of rights is binding and locked in and rock solid. There are some clauses in there about, though, competitive nature, that the ACC has to be competitive in the sport. That could be argued, well, if you're making a third of the money in TV revenue, you're not competitive. There are some other clauses that if there can be a group of schools, half of the schools, something in that range, that are challenging it, and that the league would dissolve. And there also is a factor that if the move is for Florida State not to go to the Big Ten, but to go to the SEC, then all of that TV money stays under the same umbrella of Disney and ESPN.
Right. But why would you want to give up? They have Florida State and Clemson on a really good deal right now, right? You get UNC and Duke, just obviously the highest rated basketball you're going to get. And, Virginia Tech have pretty good markets on the East Coast, right? The Washington, D.C. market obviously being one of them. Here's the thing too, like, where are these schools going to go to? If 8 schools, I think it's number is 8, everybody's mentioning, if 8 schools decided we want to break this thing up, where are all 8 going to go? I don't think there's conferences who are knocking on everybody's door saying, all right, well, we'll take the 8. Like, that's going to take some serious organization. And for the SEC, if you're ESPN too, why would you want to pay, you have FSU football for 35, what do they have the deal for? You got it under lock and key until 2036. And people think, say what you want, they might be a contender in the ACC this year. Clemson, obviously, we know what a program that's been. You still have Miami. Like, you have all of these on a great deal. I put everything I had to make sure I could keep those at that price. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the ACC is in an interesting spot in the sense that they may have the most short-term security of anyone because they got everyone locked down, but they've got the least long-term security, even probably worse in some ways than the Pac-12, because everybody's going to be pissed off and ready to leave by the time this contract's up, that they're not going to be able to keep a league together. I don't know what they're going to be able to do between now and then to sweeten the pot. Josh, you had mentioned unequal revenue distribution. I believe that that's been approved in principle, but it's not been released what those numbers are going to look like. And it's not going to be enough to make up the difference. Obviously, if the entire pot's not big enough by, if it's in roughly 35 to 40% of what the SEC and the Big Ten are bringing in, then regardless of how they distribute it, I would think that there's going to be a large incentive to make the playoffs, and that's where they could really pay off at Clemson or Florida State and try to make it more worth their while and appease them for the short term. All right, folks, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We have been doing this pretty much nonstop for 3 or 4 days. I know there are folks out there that talk realignment pretty much every day. That's not necessarily our approach to college football. We talk it when it's meaningful, when it's substantial, when there are storylines out there and decisions being made, as we saw Colorado, of course, move to the Big 12 here recently. I've been posting videos where I've looked at recent history of some of these schools against the proposed conference. So Colorado in the Big 12, let's look at recent results, and then let's project that forward. What could a good Colorado look like in the Big 12? What could a last 10 or 15 years Colorado look like in the Big 12? What are your thoughts, Josh, about Colorado being any kind of impact player in the conference?
They have to maintain the coaching staff and build up the roster. I mean, because they've just had so much roster turnover. They've got some really good top line guys, but obviously we know how this thing works. You need depth. Depth is how you win. When you get late in the season and guys are banged up and things like that, like, you need depth. Oklahoma State, good example this last year, right? Having Garrett Rangel as the backup quarterback is difficult. You need to build depth at plenty of positions. It can get really difficult when you have guys go down. That's why these top schools, option B is maybe not as good as option A, but option B for a lot of these top schools is a kid who's transferred in, who's, wants to play at a top school or has become a really good player or is another 5-star recruit. So, they have to continue to build up depth, and their talent evaluation is going to be really important. They can't, I don't think they will, but they can't deal with as much turnover as they had, anywhere near, right? They're going to need to retain guys and to keep building good rosters. And I'm interested to see what happens for them after they have 1 year and they hit the portal, what kind of influence they're able to wield, how good the NIL is, and what that means for them being able to identify certain holes and fill those spots. It's just going to be, oh, Travis Hunter, great. This is awesome. We got players like that. No, in football, one recruit does not make the team. You have to build. So there's a reason why their over under win total for the year is 3 or 4. I think this year it's gonna be exciting. It's fun, but and I'm also really curious to see how much damage Dion can do in Texas. Getting Colorado back in the state of Texas, a place where they're going to play 2 or 3 times a year at least, getting him back recruiting there, I think it's going to be a massive advantage for Colorado. So I'm very, very curious about how the roster building goes, because that's what's going to define how good Colorado can be.
What do you got, Cody?
Josh nailed it. Josh nailed it, man. But if I were to add one thing, it is ironic to me that you are seeing some people in the Pac-12. They're like, "Oh, great, Colorado's going to the Big 12. Colorado's terrible. The Big 12 got the worst team ever in the Pac-12." All this nonsense. Right now, what Brett Yormark is looking to do is, again, accomplish something major. Dion is going to get it figured out. If you see some of the clips he's had, right, with his interview with Joel Klatt, there's a reason why they're minus 50 players. There's a good foundational reason why they lost 50 players. You lost 46 players last season. So, and you saw what it took. It's going to take time for them to get it figured out. Dion's going to be able to bring talent in. Their merchandise sales have increased like almost 800% since he's gotten the job. There's a lot of buzz in Boulder. He's going to be able to get people there. Now, is he going to be able to retain the staff and do all that fun jazz? That will be the test of time. But regardless, if it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, for whatever amount of time that he's here, that is going to bring eyeballs to the Big 12. Eyeballs equal money. Money equals more revenue. More revenue equals more recruiting, right? It does matter. It will matter. The Dion effect is going to show out. And they're going to jump up and bite somebody this year. You know what I mean? They might lose a game they're not supposed to, but Dion is very good at preparation. That's always been something that he's able to do. They're going to be prepared. They're going to bite somebody this year. And if he stays and he keeps the staff in tow, I could see them vastly improving. And Josh nailed it, right? Dion wants that Texas market. Dion wants the Florida market. Dion knows he can go down to Texas and scoop up almost anybody he really, really dials in on. That's a weapon that only places like Texas have. So it is going to matter. And I think it's going to be massive for the Big 12, regardless of what their record is or isn't.
The Big 10 is reportedly warming to Oregon and Washington, as we talked about over the last few minutes. But from a football standpoint, that aside, when we were thinking at a time that maybe there was an option, and maybe it still would exist, Oregon and Washington would get a lifeboat from the Big 12 if needed, of course. Do we see programs out there? So I'll start with Utah. Would Utah be the best football program in the Big 12 going forward?
We're not talking about Oregon as an option at all, correct? Right? Oregon's off the table?
Well, I'm assuming basically Oregon and Washington would be the two best programs in a non-Oklahoma, Texas Big 12.
But after that, are you saying Utah would be the top brand in the conference?
I am putting that on the table.
No, I don't. I don't think they'd be the top brand. I think they would automatically be top 3, though, 100%. Like, again, you cannot replace. People are probably going to call me a homer, but you look at the success that Mike Gundy's had at Oklahoma State consistently. You can't exit that out completely. K-State has been a problem for a while. Baylor's had times where they were very, very good. TCU looks to be in a pretty good spot and has been previously as well. BYU's a bunch of grown men, right? That they're too deep is a bunch of grown dudes that understand. Your cerebral cortex doesn't develop when you're 25. Their whole roster is almost 25. That will count for something.
Because you guys can respond to this statement. Here's my outlook on the Big 12. Most competitive conference in college football, top to bottom, both this year and then going forward, minus OU and Texas. Secure, as Josh has outlined, in the college football playoff situation. They're going to be the third best conference, most likely. We'll have the number one. Obviously, the champion will go, probably a second place team as well. However, winning a national championship is a much different proposition than getting to the playoff. Very two different levels. I don't see a viable team. You know, there are people out there that are hyper playoff sensitive. That's all they talk about. We could talk about the playoff on here every day. There's people that's all they care about. I care about watching Oklahoma State and Kansas State play a really good football game when they're both, let's say, 7-3. That interests me, but that doesn't interest the masses. So is the Big 12 in this position where, pardon to offend possibly some Big 12 fans, the mediocrity has secured the position, the stability, and it's going to be difficult to have those kind of elite programs because they just don't exist in the conference right now to compete in the playoff?
Yeah, that's a challenge. I mean, like Fox cited it as a reason they wanted to re-sign the Big 12 is because of how competitive the league was. And that's great. But like if they want to compete, Clemson's kind of the model, right? Because Clemson had a good program for a while, and they're obviously South Carolina is a pretty good spot to be in. But like they needed some things to break right for them. Obviously, Dabo really worked out for them. But remember, like I remember growing up, Clemsoning was a thing, right? How many times we see Clemson go up against Florida State and get waxed, and it was not going well for them, and they eventually did break through. The Big 12 needs a school like a TCU, like a UCF, somebody like that to start going to those places like repeatedly, reaching those heights and then failing eventually to, eventually break through. Like you need to keep cracking it with recruiting. TCU needs to keep clearing top 25 classes. They want to capitalize off this momentum. You need to have the money, obviously, too. Clemson, I know people joke about the, offering plates at churches and whatnot, stuff like that. But obviously your fan base needs to have that kind of investment into your roster building and whatnot. But yeah, this last thing for me, but yeah, I don't know how to do it. That's the one big challenge is I don't know how to do it. And I'm like you, Mark, like I really do care. I love seeing fan bases get, like Texas Tech is a great example. I love watching them get excited the last year about what their program could be. And they're not thinking about a national championship, thinking about, hey, we can go to a Big 12 championship, because that's not something that they've been in the conversation for recently. I love that. That excites me. I'm glad the fan base is excited and trying to figure out, okay, we need this position, that position. How do we build, defense, whatnot, all these kinds of things. Like they're trying to achieve 9-10 wins. Same thing last year for Oregon State. Love to see them be able to celebrate what was an excellent year for their program and build off that. Is that stuff enough to be the top teams? No, it's not. I love to see Kansas State fans last year. So that stuff, like I kind of just closing thought here. Your team does matter. Even if your team is 4-8 or 8-4, if you and a lot of people care, your team does matter. And that's kind of, I think, with this entire realignment thing and also the CFP, it feels like not everybody matters. And you do matter. There's enough room in the umbrella for all of us. It's kind of my point. So Mark, thank you for having me on. I always appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thank you so much.
Always great, man.
Yeah, I'll link up with you, brother.
All right.
Awesome.
Cody,
yes, sir.
Great to have you on here.
Absolutely, brother. I greatly appreciate it.
Before we let you hit the road,
yes, sir.
Who scares you in the Big 12? Don't go obvious here with Texas. You got to go under the radar.
Well, for me, it's Tech.
Okay.
That's definitely Tech. I believe in what they're doing. I would put them. It's either Texas or Texas Tech. To me, has the best 1-2 quarterback combination. You could make the case for Jalen. I think Jalen Daniels is the best player in the conference, and Jason Bean is a capable backup as well. But man, I'm just a huge believer in Baron Morton, and I think Tyler Shuck, kind of like Alan Bowman, if he can stay healthy, he can do some stuff that's going to put them in a position to jump up and make some things possible.
Locked on Oklahoma State. You see the Twitter handle right there. Follow Cody. Everything he does is some really good stuff. You hear the enthusiasm, the knowledge, everything involving Oklahoma State and the Big 12. Cody, good to see you, man.
Yes, sir.
Make it on back here. You're welcome anytime, and we'll get together and talk some college football.
I love it, man. Thank you very much. God bless. Go Pokes. Appreciate you, brother.
All right, folks, we will continue here at the Voice of College Football for the rest of the day. Here is the lineup. The lineup is Michigan live at 5. That's over on the Michigan channel, of course. That's at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Florida State at 6 Eastern on the FSU channel. Miami front and center. Our Canes broadcast is at 7 Eastern. And then we make it on back here at 8:30 Eastern to talk Big Ten realignment, and with more reports coming out today, that should liven up the conversation again tonight at 8:30 Eastern. And then we've got the Pac-12 chat show. That's at 10:30 Eastern tonight right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate all your support, and hit the like button on your way out. And we appreciate your loyalty and support here at the Voice of College Football. One more super chat coming in. We've got, yes, Miss, we did run down the Big Ten news. That is not necessarily news, just to be a bit nitpicky about it. Those are reports that there are conversations going on between Oregon and Washington, of course, as we already knew, Cal and Stanford. Man, again, look up the video that I posted 1 year ago. Man, it seems like USC and UCLA have been in the Big Ten for like 4 years. 1 year ago, where I threw in Washington, Oregon, Cal, and Stanford into a Big 10/20. Sounds like that might happen. All right, but we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football again. 5, 6, 7 Eastern, 8:30 Eastern, 10:30 Eastern. Got shows galore. Lock it in at the Voice of College Football.